So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. This is the iPhone 7 Plus, obviously. This is 3.5 years later update on this phone. So the body and the design, due to the introduction of the SE from 2020, doesn't actually look irrelevant right now because Apple has not fully discontinued this design. This is just a bigger version of that, design right there in the iPhone SE 2020. This is the 7 Plus. Now, compared to the Android competition, this thing looks like a dinosaur, but compared to Apple's lineup, it still fits in pretty nicely, even though it's discontinued. You have to get this thing third party, but still, I don't think it looks that bad here 3.5 years later. What do you think? Well, the bezels are definitely thick, super thick here, but at least the display is flat on this phone. That's pretty nice. Phone's super thin though. I mean, this phone is like 7.3 millimeters thick, so very thin phone here. Definitely even thinner than 10R. It's thinner than iPhone 11, and it's definitely thinner than the Max devices. It's also pretty light as well for its size, 188 grams, so it's not that heavy either of a device here. So still like how big the 7 Plus was at 188 grams. So we talked about the display being flat, but the display is also quite sharp. 1080p gave this thing over 400 ppi, and really when I look at the 7 Plus now, I super miss the 1080p on the iPhone. It really is the best, I think, sweet spot here for the iPhone. The iPhone 10R in the 11 display does not look as sharp as this panel. Also, this is the same one that comes on the 8 Plus. So I really wish Apple would bring back, at least on their, not their most premium version, of the 1080p panel. It really is the best sweet spot, I feel like. And the 7 Plus is still very sharp. It's super nice still in 2020. But this phone didn't give us True Tone. However, it did give us the dark mode, and we did get night shift here, which was nice. Definitely made the display easier on the eyes at nighttime. So no True Tone. I don't think it's a really big deal, honestly. Going over here to App Store, yeah, a lot of people will say it's definitely necessary. You don't want to go back, but I've used phones without that feature, and it's just fine. Night shift is really important though. But you can see the dark mode, even on an LCD display here like the 7 Plus, is still a very nice experience here. So definitely thumbs up to that. When you first got the 7 Plus, you definitely did not have a dark mode here. Oh yeah, and a 16:9 display here. Yeah, you have bezels, but you got something to hold on to, and videos fit properly. Most videos are going to fit properly here. A lot of times on newer phones, you have to pinch in and then it cuts off some of the content. Most cameras that you see YouTubers filming with also shoot in this format. So that's why you'll see a lot of videos in this format. But yeah, pretty sweet that you have that here. And of course, you could watch videos in 1080 on this 1080p display. That's really nice. Also, this display is pretty similar to a lot of the newer iPhones. This thing goes up to 625 nits of brightness, so it's plenty bright. Oh yeah, and the 7 Plus, 3.5 years later, can still do this right here. It can do a landscape mode, something that even the 11 Pro Max, you want to use it like a tablet, you can do that here on 7 Plus, 8 Plus, 6S Plus, 6 Plus. This is a missed feature for me. And definitely, I do think 3.5 years later, this is still useful. Oh, and also, this thing still has 3D Touch, which is very fast and efficient here on the iPhone 7 Plus. Now, when this phone originally launched, it had iOS 10 on board, and I remember it like the back of my hand. I was actually at the Apple event, or not the Apple event, the Apple store when this thing launched, and there was a line wrapped around the building. This phone was hot when it came out. The 13.5 is still available. So if you bought this phone 3.5 years ago, your phone is still updated now. That's incredible longevity for a smartphone. Beating out, I mean, you tell me an Android phone that's still on the absolutely latest version of the software right now. So talk about support. If that's not support, I don't know what is. Now, also, you will notice that this has a rather older experience, but because, again, I keep going back to the SE 2020 has come out, this experience is still going to be in the hands of millions of users because of that phone. So it's not an outdated experience yet. And that's mostly because Apple updated the software. You just got to swipe up from the bottom. But what's nice is that at the top here, you can still see your battery percentage, something you can't see on the newer iPhone without swiping. You also have the clock right there in the middle. But other than that, it's your standard iOS grid of icons. And what I really like about iOS to this day still even is just the quality of applications. And it's getting even better with Apple Arcade now. In here, you could see a little bit of performance delay. This is not the fastest iPhone anymore, but Apple Arcade here bringing new games and stuff, apps right here. Developers are still bringing apps to the iPhone first, it seems like sometimes. many of them are bringing to both platforms at the same time now, but sometimes you'll still see a better game or a better app for the iOS experience. So still, this software is still very nice here on the iPhone 7 Plus right now, 3.5 years later. Also, Touch ID works well. No complaints here. I mean, this is second gen Touch ID. Works very well, very fast. Never had an issue with Touch ID on this phone. 3.5 years later with performance, the iPhone 7 Plus still has incredible performance across the board for an A10 Fusion chip. This thing is not no slowpoke. I mean, it's still on the budget iPad, and it's all about optimization with this phone. I mean, with iPhones in general. The reason why you can have a 3.5-year-old iPhone and the thing still runs fantastic is because of optimization. It's not because the processor is the latest, because it definitely isn't. I can tell you some areas where the iPhone 7 Plus is starting to show its age. If you're gaming, the phone gets extremely warm. I mean, it's not going to burn your hand hot, but it gets extremely warm. Next up, the battery does dip quite a bit when under heavy use, but the 3 gigs of RAM carried on into the iPhone XR, it carried on into the iPhone 8 Plus, and even the iPhone SE. The 11 got 4, but you can see this phone still performs well. There's no lag on this device, really. The only thing I found that is sometimes an Apple stutter here and there if the phone gets too hot. But other than that, it's been pretty fine here, even in 2020. Talk about storage as well. I mean, for the prices of the 7 Plus, if you want a lot of storage on the low, you can get the iPhone 7 Plus with up to 256 gigs. I mean, you can find these secondhand for around $200-300, and you can get about 256 gigs. Now, a lot of phones in that price range are offering that. So if you want a secondhand cheap iPhone, you can get a lot of storage here with the 7 Plus. So I got 128 when I got this thing. I think it was the sweet spot. It's enough where you can take photos, put your videos on, and still enjoy, no worries about storage. So I think 128 is a sweet spot. So the cameras. Well, the selling point here for the cameras was the dual 12 megapixels. It was different from that iPhone 7 you see right there in that it had portrait mode as well as telephoto. This was a big deal when the iPhone 7 Plus came out. Not a lot of phones had this. Now every phone seems to have a telephoto camera just about. But this thing could go all the way up to 10x on here. Now, this camera is not the best anymore. It doesn't have anywhere near the dynamic range of the newer iPhones. It doesn't have smart HDR, nothing like that. It can't even shoot the 4K 60, which seems pretty standard. However, there's some phones that still don't give you 4K 60, so it's not like it's a big deal. You can go over to record video 4K at 30, it locks down to. You can record slow-mo at 720 240. The newer phones could do 1080. The front camera on here is 7 megapixels for this camera, and well, that's pretty similar to the new SE actually, and this thing can do 1080 30, so nothing overly impressive for this front video or front camera. I'm not a big fan of this, but the rear cameras, especially in good lighting, the video is still extremely good focus, as always with an iPhone, and the photos turn out just fine. They're not horrible whatsoever. But this is definitely where the 7 Plus shows its age. There's a lot of mid-range, cheaper Android phones that do better camera than this. I wouldn't say better video, but definitely better photos. But still, again, if you want a good video camera for cheap, this could be a good option. So when it comes to the audio,
The iPhone 8 before it was definitely a lighter device. 11 Pro as of right now, so still giving you a premium feel with enough density to feel like you paid a substantial
the audio is not as loud
amount for this device. Next up, the body, the design
as the newer iPhones. It's not as full, not as loud, but it's still pretty good. I mean, it's still stereo speakers. 3.5 years ago, we still had stereo speakers.
of this body. Where does it?
But this was the iPhone that got rid of the headphone jack as well as a smaller 7. So we don't have headphone jack on here. Thing is, a lot of phones that people are looking at in this price category, at least where it costs now, usually want a headphone jack, but this one doesn't have it. So if you're looking at 7 Plus, keep in mind, you're gonna have to have some Bluetooth headphones, which are also much cheaper these days. So battery life, with the iPhone 7 Plus, we have a 1080p display, 3.5 years later. This boy is still a day phone as long as your battery health is not trash. Like if you've trashed your battery, you haven't been charging it properly, or just over time it just really got bad. This is an area, if you're looking for one of these, really look at this area, because if you have like 89, this phone probably will have trash battery life. But if it has a high capacity, this is still a good day phone right here. And this is no super impressive 2.5 day phone, but this definitely will get through most people's day, especially, just regular iPhone use. But I find that to get me really comfortably through the day, I have to leave this thing on low power mode. I get around 5 to 6 hours screen time with this phone, and the standby time is pretty amazing as well. If you put this thing down, don't use it, it hardly drains any battery life. So the phone call quality, I think this was before the whole, Qualcomm dispute. So the phone call quality was excellent on here. LTE was strong on this phone as well. And 3.5 years later, I still like the phone call. I always liked the speakerphone on here as well. That was also nice because it gave us the dual speakers. It's pretty excellent here. You don't have an issue. You're not going to have an issue here. So at the end of the day, the iPhone 7 Plus experience still feels really nice. The price you can get one of these now, you won't be disappointed. Hopefully this thing gets iOS 14. The bezels are huge on this device, but the display is sharp. Touch ID is still a very liked feature for a lot of people. I gotta say, at the end of the day, if you're looking for a cheap secondhand iPhone, maybe you haven't had an iPhone ever before, you want a big way to try this thing out, this could be a very low risk here, just to kind of get your feet wet with iOS. But I would definitely not recommend this if you're looking for a long-term solution. You might want to look at the iPhone SE 2020 or even the iPhone XR. A lot of those are coming down in price as well. Or even consider the 8 Plus, which is a bit better with wireless charging and a little bit better battery life in my experience, and better cameras than the 7 Plus. But if you have the 7 Plus, go ahead and share your experience down below with the community. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Let me know if you want to see the 7 3.5 years later. It's a little bit different than this boy. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe, stay well. Nick here. Be sure to be well. Peace.